Hey guys, George, Lissy, Kev, what's one thing that this garage is missing? Anyone take a guess?
Oh,
Have a stab at it.
the only thing I can really think of is windows.
Yeah, it's missing some windows. It's
Yeah,
missing
yeah.
some windows. And I mean, it's got one door, but it's a shambles. This door.
Perhaps a new one that doesn't bang.
Oh, new one that is, isn't a safety risk. Now, where would we go to get said windows and doors? Any ideas?
Who would we see?
Well, we need maybe the best one the best windows and doors provider in the country, and ideally they do conservatories too. Now, off the top of your head, any names spring to mind?
I can't think of anyone.
Kev, anyone? No. How about Graham's Windows and Doors? Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, the Steve Kayla Show is now sponsored by Graham's Windows and Doors at grahamswindowsanddoors.co.uk. They specialise in windows, doors and conservatories. If you go to grahamswindowsanddoors.co.uk, you can see the full scope of the work that they do. Their full stock. It's incredible. They are located now, if you live in Yeovil, they're located near Five Way School, where Rainbow's video store used to be and Ed's Barbershop. Go on down, get some quotes, look at their stock, it's incredible. Thank you so much to James and Sherelle of Graham's Windows and Doors for sponsoring us. It means a lot that you support the sort of madness that happens over here, so we really appreciate it. So guys, head on over to grahamswindowsanddoors.co.uk. Now, on with the show.
Hi everyone.
Hello and welcome to the Steve Kaylis Show. I'm Steve Kaylis, and today I'm joined by a very special guest. I'm joined by Madison Day. Madison, how are you? Thank you so much for doing the Steve Kaylis Show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. I know I reached out to you. I know that your podcasts are quite big, and I've to be honest, I think this is the first podcast I've done. I've done some radio shows, but not a podcast. And yeah, I was impressed that number one, you read the book before we're doing the interview, which is novel. And I just want to get the word out there, so I'm contacting anybody and everybody who I can who can share the word. Yeah,
good idea. And I'd like to help as much as I can. So maybe we should just jump straight in and what. I mean, if at any point I'm asking a question that you don't like or is uncomfortable or something, I'm not that sort of interviewer, but then to just say everything can be cut or edited, so there's no pressure to think on the spot or anything. You can take your time and that sort of thing. Okay?
Thanks, Steve. Thank you.
No worries. Okay, so what is Despite It All about? Despite It All is the name of your book. What is Despite It All about?
So, Despite It All comes actually from a philosopher called Rupi Kaur, and she writes lots of wonderful things about survival. And one of her sayings is, "And here you are living, despite it all." So that was the inspiration for the title. And despite it all, here I am living. And you've read the book, and so you know I maybe shouldn't be.
Oh man, yeah. Let me tell you, before we get into that, the day the book came, that evening I laid in bed next to my fiance and I started to read, and I very quickly learned that reading it right before bed was uncomfortable for me, because I sometimes dream about whatever it is I'm reading, and 3 pages in I thought, well, good Lord, I really underestimated just how I'm struggling to find the right word for it. It's very raw. I mean, you write beautifully. You write so beautifully, and you somehow manage to weave in humor and these really, really lovely, pure human moments.
Thank you.
But then the dark side of it is
dark.
It's really so I had to put it down after a few pages initially and then start reading it during the day, because I was susceptible to
that was safer.
It is for me. So I cut you off. So tell me about Despite It All. What is it about?
So it's ultimately about my life, my childhood, and the childhood of my brother, and how we survived childhood. But how childhood trauma can become so instilled in us that it goes on to affect the rest of the life course, that it infiltrates every aspect of your life if you let it. And so it is a story ultimately about having a mother with Munchausen by proxy.
Now, for people who don't know,
Yeah.
what is Munchausen by proxy?
So it is a well, I call it an illness. There are lots of authors that say no, it's not an illness at all, but I say it's an illness that parents, carers, usually mothers, but some fathers have. We know that there's been cases in the UK where nurses have had it, and they will purposefully make a child sick in order to gain attention. Now we know that this is really risky behaviour. So Munchausen by proxy is one of the deadliest forms of child abuse, because you can make a child so sick that they actually die, and that happens. And there are lots of instances in my childhood where I maybe shouldn't have survived. Munchausen by proxy is also complicated because my mother induced injury on me and my brother as well. So not just illness, but injury, and then would fabricate a story, and we would be part of that deception in order that she get attention from medical professions, from police, from whoever might become involved.
Yeah, wow. And can I just say the character of your mother in the book is a really well written. You paint the picture of her in a way that is painful and frustrating, because you show the Jekyll and Hyde really well. You show the monster, and I remember, there's a specific time I'm thinking of when you were a teenager and you'd run away and you were thinking, man, despite everything, I'd love to see my mum right now. And because there was a rarer but gentler side to the nature, which must have made it all the more torturous that there was then this monster. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, and I think it did make it more torturous, because in the rare moments where she was lovely, and she was, I longed for her to be like that. And then, of course, she would flip back to her usual self. But I never stopped wanting the mothering part of her, which was very thin, but it was there all the same. So yeah, it was frustrating, I think. And that's a really good incident that explains that she came and she was my savior, and then in a heartbeat she was gone. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and that was, I don't want to jump all over the place, different places along your timeline, but that I was so frustrated then that I was like, oh my God, wow, maybe this character, there's some...
She's going to redeem herself. Yes.
Yeah, maybe it's the redemption arc, and then because it was such a good, fun, sort of short period that you had there with her, where she was looking after you and protecting you, and then vanishes, and I even went wow so out loud. It was such a frustrating moment for the reader even.
It was really hard to write that bit. That was like one of those parts of the book when I was writing it, and I'm sat under the clock at Waverley Station in Edinburgh, and I was like, wow, this happened to me, when I'm writing about it. So I almost had to relive a lot of those events that were really, really painful and frustrating. Yeah. Well, that's an understatement, torturous even to write about those and to relive those and to kind of unearth all of those emotions that you'd shut away. You shut them away a long time ago in order to survive. Yeah, I had to open the door on all of them and revisit them all. Yeah,
I don't envy that. That must have been awful. But ultimately, your book is something that anyone in a similar situation will I suspect get some sense of relief of, man, there's someone else out there who's had to endure this, or man, Madison's had to endure all of that. I can at least survive this, and do you know what I mean? There's some hope in there.
That was one of the key reasons why I wanted to write it. I wanted to get the message out there that despite it all, despite everything I went through, I don't want to continue to be a victim. I've been a victim through my childhood and through a lot of my adult life. And then you get to a point where you can say, I will be a victim no more, and I'm not going to be a victim of my past. I won't be a victim of my childhood. I've always strived for things that I wanted, like going to university. I got a first class honours against all the odds. But yeah, I wanted to put the message out there that you can still do exactly what you want to do. There's nothing stopping you. Only you stops you.
Yeah. And I do all the time. Yeah.
Yes. And I do sometimes. Yes. I'm sure most of us do. Yeah.
I mean, so let's try and take the listener on a little bit of a journey here through your story. So what's the earliest memories you have of your mother where you started to, I mean, you were very young right at the start of the book, and even that, it was when you came home and you'd gone to the shop for her, and give us an idea of what it is that young you had to live with.
I suppose just sporadic, aggressive, drunken behaviour that I learned very, very, very young. Mum's drunk, we're in trouble. And that incident that you're referring to is my first memory of abuse from her. And you know, I'd just been run over by a car, and all I wanted to do was.
Yeah, because this was the bit that made me put the book down when I first started reading it.
Yeah, so we had just moved up to Northumberland, to a little place called Ashington, which was a mining village, and I was only very young, so around 6 or 7. And it was the good old days where parents would write on the back of a fag packet, "Can you please serve my daughter or my son with 20 Benson and Hedges?" And the shop would give a 6-year-old some cigarettes. And so I found my way to the local shops, and I'm very graphic in the writing of this part. I remember everything. I remember watching a dead pig hanging in a butcher's window, and I'm very perceptive of everything that's going on around me, but not perceptive enough to miss the car hurtling towards me on the way back home. And so I got run over, and when I was run over, I remember just being dreadfully embarrassed. Like, I was in pain. This car hit me hard. But all I wanted to do was run home to my mum. And a police car stopped me en route and put me in the car. He took me home. And then we had this embrace at the front door where my mum is, "Oh my goodness, you know, I'll take you to the hospital." This caring, doting mother. And then the policeman left, the door shut behind him, and she just went berserk. And that was the first physical abuse that I remember. So she slapped me until I saw stars, and said I'd brought shame on the family. And it was at that moment that I realised, I suppose, how deviant she was. You know, she portrayed this doting mother on the doorstep, and she wasn't that person at all. I realised that she was quite dangerous, and I was very, very young to realise something so damning, that your mother is not the same as other mums.
Yeah. And what do you make of your? And the other thing I wanted to say to you was that your brother. Robbie? Did I get that
yes.
right? Yeah. So your brother Robbie, I think he is the character of Robbie in the book, the Robbie that I know via this book.
Yeah.
The way you write about him, his character, and
Yeah.
the great parts of his personality leap off the page.
Yeah.
He is such a wickedly funny and interesting character, and your sort of love for your brother shines through in the book. And I want to tell you that you write about him beautifully. You do him a real honor.
Thank you.
I feel like I almost feel like, I mean, towards the end, I was sort of crushed and sad because you've done such a painfully good job of describing his character. So it was wonderful. So at the
Thank
time,
you.
when this was happening, how old would that specific incident say? How old would Robbie have been?
So he would have been around 5. And I remember him just rocking, like on the chair, like banging his head on the back of the chair, just constant rocking. He did that his whole childhood. He never stopped. I remember him doing it that day. I think it was his distress. I think he was distressed. And then he never stopped rocking. He rocked until till adulthood.
Yeah. You and Robbie were children when you first started to notice, this side of your mother started to come out. And then as you grew older, how consistent was this? I mean, and the other sort of tricky thing I'm skirting around is the abuse that you got from your mother.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just sort of physical, violent abuse.
No.
It was. You say it in the book, so I hope it's okay to sort of ask you about it. But you do mention sexual abuse, and all those different sorts of abuses from your mother. How do you now, as an adult, how do you
process that?
Yeah, how do you process it? How do you, day to day, how do you make sense of what happened to you as a child?
Oh, I think there was a part of me that disowned my inner child as I moved into adulthood. I disowned her at some point in my life, maybe where I couldn't cope with all the trauma anymore, and put her to bed and kind of just moved on. But of course, the trauma follows you, doesn't just go away. I think writing the book made me get her back out of wherever I'd put her, some dark space. I had to get her out and kind of tackle everything that she went through. And that was painful. It was painful writing in lots of parts. Acknowledging that happened to me, that was that was my inner child. And that was my childhood. For me, I think my saving grace has been that I'm inquisitive and I've read around everything to do with childhood trauma, everything to do with Munchausen by proxy, everything to do with everything that affects me or affected me in my childhood. And that's just allowed me to put things back to bed. Understanding it gives you so much power. And I still do lots of things that I know are attributed to my childhood, but I just tell myself, Madison, it's fine that you've behaved like this or that you feel like this. Yeah. And I understand why, because
you're mothering yourself in a way.
I kind of am. Yeah, that's a really good way of looking at it, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, which makes total sense. I mean, I think that's not uncommon if people have been let down in that space. I know it's typical among boys who then become fathers is that they then learn in a way to refather themselves so that they can then parent their son properly. So that's a totally healthy coping mechanism, I imagine. So
yeah.
That makes sense. So I don't want to give away all of everything that happens in the book because I want people to read it and be as sort of shocked and stirred by it as I was. So you spent a long time before you sort of run away, you and Robbie in the house and having to live with your mother and her drinking problem and all of the abuses that sort of came with that. But what did you notice about the parallels between when you were reaching adulthood, how you were dealing with it and how your brother Robbie was dealing with it? I mean, were you having an equal experience, do you think, or do you think he was having a tougher time processing what happened?
Yeah, he had a tougher time. He never really could process what happened. He wasn't doing the same things as me. He wasn't doing the reading. I was doing things like mindfulness and yoga and aromatherapy and reflexology and everything that I could think of in order to heal. I tried to get him to go to sound baths with me, just all the things that I felt were really beneficial for me. But he just didn't tackle it like me, and was very fatalistic, like I'm doomed because of our childhood. So yeah, it was difficult to try and keep him on track. So he was on a very different journey than I was in terms of healing.
What do you make, this is something I wanted to ask you as well, is what do you make of because your father was, relatively, he was working away a lot, but otherwise, relatively speaking, was pretty ever present throughout your childhood. When he wasn't working away, he was at home and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So how much do you think how much did he see, and what do you make of that now? Like, did you think your father just didn't see, your mother was very good and very, very sneaky and very good at hiding everything, or what is that there with your father? What do you think he saw?
There's an element of she was very good and very sneaky and a fabulous actress, and there is a part of him that probably knew that things were going on, but was terrified of her himself. I don't know how. He says now, I would confront her, but she was terrifying. And he was young. He was a young father. He just was trying to pay the mortgage and make sure that we had shoes and, and what I remember about my childhood, and it's probably saved me, is the fact that when he was there, I had normality, and he would take us swimming and he would take us into the forest looking for birds' nests, and he would take me horse riding, and he would be the one that would take us on holidays. And he probably saved me. I feel that if I'd been in that childhood without my dad, we probably wouldn't have survived it.
Yeah, and that comes across because I have no idea what your dad looks like, but in the character that I paint in my mind's eye after reading the book is of he's an oasis for you.
Yeah,
and you paint the sort of lovely side of his nature really, really well.
Yeah, he's a very, very lovely person, a very lovely man. He just got involved with the wrong woman, and like me and my brother, was just another victim of her.
Yeah. So what inspired you then, ultimately? I know you've given us sort of a couple of the reasons. So what is it that made you want to put everything on paper? Is it so that you could get your story out there and help others, and you can get some height and power over the things that have happened to you? So what moved you to want to write the book in the first place?
So I've wanted to write it all my life, from being like late teens, 20. I've always said to myself, I'm going to write a book. Okay, so I'm 30 odd years, a bit later than I expected, but it's never left. The drive to write the book has never left me. I just never had a window to stop my life and sit down and write a book. And you need a big window to do that. I can't anyway. I can't go to work and do all the things that I have to do and write a book. I can't do that. I have to take it a year out. I took a year out. We moved to Spain. We had a holiday home over there, and I literally sat at a computer for a year. full time. It was my full time job.
Wow.
And that was the only way that I could finish the book.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it was this inner drive, but then it's also because I want to raise awareness about Munchausen by proxy. Not everybody wants to read a textbook on it. For some people, it's more tangible if they read a memoir, where they have a through the eyes of a child account of what it was like living with a mother like that.
Yeah, and as a father, it's very. I mean, like as you said, the way you weave everything together is masterful. It's beautiful. You've written a really, really good book. But as a father, there's times where I had to put the book down or take a breath and talk to my fiance about what it is that I just read, because it makes you consider real evil and real darkness and real things that we are for the most part trained to ignore, and and mercifully so. If we were aware of all of the horrible things happening around us all the time, we'd all have a nervous breakdown.
We would.
It's important to tell this story and to raise awareness for Munchausen by proxy, because it's scary. I didn't know about it at all until your book, so it's a terrifying thing.
It is. I mean, the more I think about it, the more I analyze it, the more terrifying it becomes. I suppose it's the deception, the fact that, and I joke about it in the book. My dad used to say it, my mum deserved an Oscar. She's like Bette Davis. She was fantastic at telling lies, and she was a beautiful woman who could act so sweet, and nobody would have believed me. If I'd said my mum is abusing me, nobody would have believed me. It's that level of deception that is scary. Well, I suppose that worries me too, because what's the likelihood of those kinds of mothers of being convicted of the abuse? They're so good at what they do.
Yeah, and I mean, it doesn't. The worrying thing as well for me is like the statistics. When I started to do research on it, the statistics sort of said to me that there's a lot of work to be done. There needs to be more statistics. That's what I learned from the statistics. Do you know what I mean? Yes. There needs to be more awareness, more research into exactly what it is, exactly what happens here, and how to protect people and how to identify it, that sort of thing. And your book will go down as a breaking that wall that helped protect kids.
I hope so. I mean, it has come out around the same time that the Gypsy Rose Blanchard case has just happened. So she was a teenage girl who had a life, a lot of it in public eye, with a mother with Munchausen by proxy. And that displays beautifully how wonderful her mother was at acting. Nobody would have believed that she was actually horrifically abusing this child. And ultimately, the mother gets murdered by Gypsy Rose Blanchard's boyfriend. And she's just been released early from prison. And there's like two camps. Like, the first camp is agree that yes, she should be released. She was a victim and she was trying to survive and escape this horrific childhood, and otherwise she would have never escaped her mother. And then obviously there's this camp that says no, murder's murder. And to be perfectly honest, if somebody had said to me, we'll take your mother away from you, I'd have been quite happy for that to happen. So I know exactly what she went through. Those frustrations that even if you speak out, nobody is ever going to listen to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
no, actually, I came across your story first, and then happened across that. Then
yeah.
so that's how that's when I start. Yeah, after I started to sort of look more into it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So actually, there is that which highlights this thing that otherwise might not have quite broken into sort of public consciousness. So
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's been really good for raising awareness globally. It's been a good, landmark case. So it's also been good for my book as well. So yeah, good that we're getting our narratives out there. We're getting our stories out there. And hopefully sharing something that has been taboo. Nobody's really talked about it. It's a taboo subject area. I didn't really want to talk about it, even though I did. It was like I didn't want to admit that I was one of those kids with a Munchausen mother. That was hard to digest. But I am.
do you think she would have known? How do you think she was able to live with the things that she did to you? Because the way that you described her is certainly not stupid.
No.
So how do you think that she managed to? I mean, and this is just a general question. I always wonder about these sorts of cases or incidents. How do you think she coped with herself?
I think it was through alcohol.
Right.
I think that's why she was a chronic alcoholic. And she would drink from the moment she opened her eyes until the moment she went to sleep. And she did try to dry out on a number of occasions, but would always go back to alcohol. And during those dry periods, and I write about this, when she was in I call it Morpeth Nut House because that's what we used to call it as kids. I'm sure that's not very PC now, but it was Morpeth Nut House, and she dried out, and she was beautiful. She was this beautiful, kind lady. But she did say to my dad once, "I can't not drink. I have to drink to deal with all the things I have to deal with," and I guess that part of those things were the things that she'd inflicted on me and my brother.
I see. So I want to encourage people to go to Amazon, look for Despite It All by Madison Alexander Day, and read the story for themselves. Because it's like I said, somehow you managed to weave in some humor and levity, and you're a wonderful writer. And so I want people to go out, and I don't want to reveal too much more because I think people should go and actually read your book. Is there anything in particular that you think people should know, or you want people to know before going out and getting the book?
I suppose the feedback from the book is that it's a page turner. I write very short, snappy chapters, so you're in and you're out. I take you into a scene and then you're out of it. Because I guess I did that because I guess I get bored with reading long, lengthy chapters. So I just wanted to make just quick statements about a certain event in my life. I always try to make the reader laugh, but then all of a sudden I'll hit you with a, wow, I wasn't expecting that. Yeah. And that's been one of the key feedback, that it's hard hitting, but that ultimately people have got something from it, because I'm sure that everybody who reads it can relate in some way, even if it's not to do with a mother with Munchausen by proxy, even if it's to do with being with a dysfunctional boyfriend, which I've had a few of, by the way. People have said to me, wow, I really got that bit. I've been there before and I felt exactly the same. And I think there's something in there for everybody. It deals with death. It deals with grief, and ultimately it deals with surviving.
I would say that your description of grief towards the end of the book and I read a lot. I read a lot because I just, it's something I'm passionate about, and it also helps me with the show. And we speak over the years. We've talked to a lot of authors and books, and so I'm always reading. And I would say that your description of your grief that you suffered towards the end of the book is one of the most. It's maybe the best I've ever read. It was profound because I felt I had some residual heartache on your behalf, as it was so well written. But that's also why I want to tell you that your brother is such a good character in the book, and that the lovely qualities in him that you so obviously loved shine here. Is so evident. There is an immortal version of him in this book that you've managed to capture beautifully. So credit to you. That was great. Yeah,
thanks, Steve. The final chapter of the book, it's funny because the rest of the chapters probably took 11 months to write, 11 and a half months to write. And the final chapter I wrote in a couple of weeks, maybe a bit less. And it was like something inside me. It was a hard chapter to write, but it was something inside me writing it, someone inside me writing it. And it was almost like the next day I'd read it back and go, did I write that? Like, wow. It was just like this inner pain, I guess. I wrote it through a lot of pain. And I guess that's why when people read that part, they become so emotional, but it's also not so negative. It's uplifting because that's what I believe. I'm not going to give the story away. I have to say as well that my ultimate goal for the book is to have it made into a screenplay. So a series, a film, and I just can see that final scene play out. I can see that really, really powerful final scene playing out in visual. So that's my next challenge.
Yeah, you'll get there. That'll be.
Thank you.
Because I think it's that's actually my first thought after I finished reading it was, man, it'd be good to see that on a screen. You know what I mean? Because then it could just
on the screen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, listen, I think your book, like I said, your book was harsh at times as a father to read some of the chapters, and I think that you are great, and I think you are my favorite type of people to speak to on the podcast are people who have had to endure things that I think I would be totally broken by that. I would never survive that. I would never be able to get up. And then here you are, this titan of the human spirit that somehow has not only survived but prevailed and thrived, and you're doing wonderful things, and you're either are or becoming who you want to be, and that's incredible and inspiring. So I want to thank you for talking to me today, and I want to thank you for sharing some of your story with me. It's been an honor.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on the show, and thank you for all your wonderful feedback. When you read the book, when somebody says, I'm going to read your book, there's almost a part of me every time that goes, I bet they hate it. And that's part of my childhood, by the way. That's
sure.
That kind of lack of confidence, if that's probably what it is. That stays with you. It's only there for a moment, because then you tell yourself, Madison, you've just wrote a book and it's selling all over the world, behave yourself.
Yeah.
But still, just for that split second, I was like, oh my God, what if he hates it? And then when you sent me that message saying, oh my God, this is wonderful. And it's really nice to get that feedback. I really appreciate it.
Oh, hey, no problem. Well, listen, Madison, thank you so much for being on the Steve Cayley Show.
Thank you for having me.
Hiya, you're right. Hi, everyone.